Elias Carter had always thought of himself as a competent pilot, which was to say he hadn't yet blown up a spacecraft while fully awake and conscious. That morning, however, as he wrestled the controls of his aging freighter through the Lyra sector's infamous wormhole turbulence, competent felt like a distant memory. The warning alarms screamed in his ears, a chorus of red lights painting the cockpit like some malevolent disco party, and he muttered, "I swear one day these ships will vote me off the pilot roster." He grabbed the throttle, tried to stabilize the vessel, and promptly flipped a switch labeled, "Definitely not the one you should touch." The ship lurched sideways, and Elias went tumbling across the cabin, bouncing off a wall with the kind of grace only a human in zero-G could muster when fully unprepared. When the freighter finally crashed, it was in a spectacular explosion of sparks and floating containers, leaving him dangling from a ceiling strap over a puddle of glittering liquid he didn't recognize. As he disentangled himself, trying to convince gravity to be a little more reasonable, a voice rang out, smooth, commanding, and distinctly irritated. "You have no sense of spatial awareness, human." Elias looked up to see her. Seraphine? She stood perfectly balanced on a hovering platform that he assumed was some sort of personal transport, her long, elegant ears twitching like the antennae of a particularly judgmental insect. She had the kind of presence that made a person immediately aware of their own clumsiness, and Elias was grateful for the low gravity because he needed the extra momentum to retreat a few feet without face-planting again. Good morning," he offered, waving one hand as if that might excuse the complete destruction of her hovercraft, which was now a smoking heap beside him. She regarded him with an expression that combined outrage, disbelief, and, he dared hope, amusement. "Morning," she repeated, her voice carefully measured. "I'd call it catastrophic." "Ah, semantics," Elias said with a sheepish grin. "I prefer to think of it as creative reallocation of resources. You know, freeing up space for innovation, very forward-thinking." He gave a little salute, which mostly resulted in him spinning slightly in zero-G and bumping into the console. Seraphine sighed, a sound like wind over crystalline cliffs. "Your species' concept of humor is inefficient." Elias laughed anyway, mostly to hide the fact that he was reconsidering whether life insurance had a clause for death by alien wrath. Before he could apologize or make another joke that might unintentionally escalate hostilities, the ground trembled, and from the glowing crystal forests surrounding the crash site came a group of robotic scavengers. They weren't particularly menacing at first glance, round, rolling machines with pincers, but Elias knew enough about sci-fi movies and half-forgotten AI protocols to panic anyway. "Oh no, of course they're here, of course. Because why wouldn't a fleet of sentient scrap collectors arrive immediately after I mess everything up?" Seraphine's eyes narrowed. "Stay close, human." She leapt onto a nearby crystalline boulder, her ears quivering as if scanning for electromagnetic interference. Elias, trying to mimic her style, ended up hanging upside down from a vine of bioluminescent growth. "I'm strategically evaluating," he announced. "Tactical reconnaissance." The scavengers advanced, their pincers clattering. Elias swung himself down with a flourish that only slightly resembled competence. I think they want to shake hands," he said, waving awkwardly. One of the scavengers zipped past, narrowly missing his head, and he muttered, "Yeah, very friendly. Totally human-appropriate greeting." Seraphine charged, moving with lethal elegance, slicing through the nearest scavenger like it was made of paper. Elias stumbled after her, swinging a wrench with little effectiveness but remarkable enthusiasm. Somehow, they fought side by side, and despite the chaos, Elias couldn't stop noticing the way her long ears flicked with every motion, small, delicate signals of her concentration and perhaps even amusement. He quickly decided not to dwell on that while holding a wrench against an advancing pincer. When the last scavenger collapsed into a smoking heap, Elias wiped his brow and glanced at her. "So that went pretty okay, right?" Seraphine's ears twitched again and she tilted her head. "Surprisingly adequate for a human." "I'll take it," Elias said, pumping a fist. "Victory. Also, I think I may have invented a new combat technique, accidental flailing. Guaranteed to confuse every opponent, possibly yourself." Seraphine allowed herself a short, almost imperceptible smile. Elias took it as a huge victory, although he couldn't quite tell if she was smiling at him or just at the absurdity of his constant commentary. By evening, they found themselves sitting on the edge of a cliff that overlooked the glowing crystal rivers, the light reflecting off their faces in a surreal, otherworldly pattern. Elias offered her a battered thermos. Tea, coffee, radioactive sludge. I packed an assortment. Seraphine shook her head. Water is sufficient. Ah, yes, the subtle elegance of hydration, he said solemnly. I too have mastered the art of basic survival. Watch me not die while standing very dramatically. He tried to strike a heroic pose and promptly fell backward off the cliff edge, catching himself on a floating rock. Seraphine snorted, though her composure remained intact. As darkness settled across the bioluminescent landscape, Elias realized something strange. Despite the chaos, the near-death experiences, and the fact that he had probably violated several interstellar regulations just by existing in the same quadrant as her, he didn't want to leave. Somehow, this long-eared warrior, annoying, disciplined, impossibly skilled, and now faintly amused by him, had made the void feel less empty. He glanced at her, trying to hide his grin. You know, if we survive this, I think we could make quite the team. Her ears flicked once, the closest thing to a wink he'd seen. Perhaps, but do not assume I will tolerate your incompetence indefinitely. Hey, he said, in my defense, chaos builds character, and apparently romance. She didn't answer, but the corner of her mouth twitched. Elias counted that as a win, carefully ignoring the part of him that thought maybe, just maybe, the universe was about to get very, very interesting. Floating above the crystal river, two unlikely allies, one human, one long-eared alien, prepared for the adventures neither of them could yet imagine, laughing quietly at the absurdity of surviving together in a galaxy that seemed determined to punish anyone with a sense of humor. Elias woke to the faint hum of the freighter's engines, which sounded suspiciously like a cat gargling marbles. He squinted at the console and realized he was alone. Well, except for the alien woman sprawled across the co-pilot seat, her long ears twitching in sleep like two delicate vines tracing the air currents. She looked almost human in repose, save for those ears which were impossibly elegant, almost absurdly expressive, and somehow the focal point of every thought he had before he even got coffee. Carefully, so as not to startle her, he reached for the navigation panel, only to knock over a cup of something suspiciously luminescent. The liquid floated in zero-G like tiny green fireflies. He muttered, smooth. Smooth as a gravity-free juggling act. Seraphine's eyes opened a fraction, one ear twitching as if she sensed his commentary even before he spoke. Did you spill it again? She asked in that measured, exasperated tone that made him want to apologize and also laugh at the same time. Yes, he admitted with a sheepish grin. Yes, I did. It's an experimental way to test fluid dynamics in low gravity, totally scientific. She raised one elegant eyebrow. You're incorrigible. I prefer the term innovatively chaotic, he said. Their banter was cut short by the freighter's warning lights. The AI announced in a calm, robotic voice that their ship was approaching a sentient asteroid field that demanded a toll for passage. Elias rubbed his eyes. Of course. Why wouldn't we encounter tax-collecting rocks? I was hoping for space pirates or sentient vending machines. This is much less intimidating. Seraphine's ears twitched sharply. They are not rocks. They are the Talran intelligent asteroid dwellers, and you should address them with proper respect or they will eject you into the void with extreme prejudice. Elias groaned, respect, I barely respect my alarm clock. Navigating through the Talran field proved challenging, especially since Elias' piloting involved a series of improvisations he liked to call winging it with flair. He swerved, looped, and spun in patterns that somehow confused both the asteroids and his own understanding of physics. Seraphine barked orders, her long ears slicing through the air with each precise gesture, guiding him like a maestro conducting a chaotic orchestra. One asteroid rotated suddenly, eye-like sensors glowing, and Elias shouted, Do we tip it, bribe it, wave politely? Stop flailing, follow my directions, she said, though a twitch of her ears betrayed her amusement. Elias complied more or less, narrowly avoiding what might have been a very unpleasant collision. After passing the Talran, they both collapsed in the control cabin, breathing hard. Elias grinned. That was exhilarating. I think we might be ready for a low-stakes asteroid karaoke competition next. You are lucky I have patience, Seraphine said, though her tone softened. Few humans survived the first encounter with the Tauren. The days that followed were filled with a strange rhythm of danger and humor. Elias tried to master alien piloting techniques, which involved gestures, hums, and what he suspected was an interpretive dance of sorts. His failures were spectacular. At one point, he accidentally engaged the hyperdrive while trying to adjust the oxygen levels, causing the freighter to spin 3 times in zero-G before bumping into a maintenance drone. Seraphine watched, ears twitching, and said only, "You make even the simplest tasks interesting." Elias took that as faint praise. "I'll write that down, interesting equals good." They also had to deal with occasional pirate skirmishes and bounty hunters, who seemed to enjoy taunting them over interstellar radio. Elias developed a habit of responding with ridiculous accents or completely unrelated jokes. During one chase through a nebula of luminous gas, he broadcasted, "Attention, space marauders, your mother's called, they want their helmets back." Seraphine groaned but didn't intervene. Amazingly, the pirates disengaged, possibly out of sheer confusion. Between the chaos, quiet moments emerged. They floated together in the observation deck, staring at a supernova blossoming in violet and gold light. Elias nudged a floating packet of dried rations toward her. "Snack," he offered. She shook her head. "We eat when necessary, not for amusement." "Ah," he said, nibbling himself, "so you don't snack on adventure, disappointing." One evening, Seraphine shared stories of her past missions, of planets lost to collapsing stars and fleets that vanished into the void. Elias listened, amazed and silently terrified, and offered comments that were either comforting or ridiculously inappropriate. "So basically, you've been in the cosmic version of my dating life, minus the exploding ships." She let out a short, unrestrained laugh, startling even her. Elias blinked. I mean, I do that on purpose sometimes." Despite or perhaps because of their shared dangers, a bond deepened. Elias' human stubbornness and humor contrasted sharply with Seraphine's disciplined, lethal elegance, but somehow they fit together like mismatched pieces of a cosmic puzzle. Their arguments, fights, and misadventures became the scaffolding of an intimacy neither had expected. On one mission to deliver emergency supplies to a remote colony, they encountered malfunctioning AI systems in a derelict space station. Gravity fluctuated like a carnival ride, and coffee dispensers sprayed hot liquid in unpredictable arcs. Elias laughed so hard he nearly knocked himself into a maintenance shaft. "Well, this is more fun than I imagined," he said, dodging a floating cup. Seraphine shook her head, laughing despite herself. "You are impossible." "But delightfully so," he added. By the time they successfully navigated the station's collapsing systems, Elias realized something profound. He had grown to care for her more than he expected, perhaps more than he had ever cared for anyone. And yet their worlds were galaxies apart, literally and figuratively. He glanced at her, ears flicking, eyes focused on the blinking lights of the console. "You know," he said quietly, "if we survive all this chaos, I think we might actually be a decent team." She didn't respond immediately, but her ears twitched toward him. A small sign, maybe, that she agreed, or at least tolerated him. Elias smiled to himself, knowing that for all the absurdity and peril of their journey, he had discovered something rare. A connection that was equal parts ridiculous, terrifying, and exhilarating. Floating together in the middle of the station's artificial night, Elias realized that amidst pirates, bounty hunters, and sentient asteroid fields, he had found a strange sense of home. It was fragile, unpredictable, and almost certainly doomed, but for the first time he didn't care. Not yet. Not when the universe was this vast, this absurd, and this breathtakingly alive. Elias Carter had long since stopped expecting the universe to be polite. By the time they reached the outer rim of the Ganymede sector, he had developed a comfortable routine of narrowly avoiding death while making jokes that no one but Seraphine seemed to appreciate. And yet, despite all the close calls, the zero-gravity mishaps, and the occasional insult hurled at him across the cockpit, he had never felt more alive. Seraphine, sitting beside him with her long ears twitching like twin compasses, kept the ship steady with her calm precision, though he caught the occasional eye roll when he muttered, "I think we could monetize asteroid dodgeball. You know, tourist attraction." Their current mission was perhaps the most audacious yet. Infiltrate a warlord's fortress moon, rescue a convoy of enslaved aliens, and escape before the entire sector decided to throw a tantrum at their audacity. Elias adjusted his flight gloves nervously. So, do you think the warlord is going to mind if we, oh, I don't know, fly in like two slightly deranged humans in a rust bucket? Seraphine didn't answer immediately, just flicked her ears in what he decided must be alien sarcasm. Focus, human, I will handle diplomacy with our less civilized associates. Diplomacy, of course, involved a mix of lasers, stealth maneuvers, and Elias inadvertently triggering every alarm in the fortress. He spent the first 10 minutes yelling, "No, that button does not open the snack dispenser," only to realize it had actually opened a defense grid. Seraphine ducked behind a bulkhead, ears quivering with both irritation and amusement. "You are singularly skilled at creating chaos," she said, firing with lethal precision at the guards approaching them. By mid-mission, the freighter had collided with a surveillance drone, and Elias was dangling upside down from a magnetic beam, attempting to retrieve his wrench. "I swear I'm a trained professional," he shouted. "It's just that training manuals didn't cover flailing heroically while inverted." Very niche scenario. Seraphine's ears flicked sharply. "You will survive this by luck alone." "And by charm," Elias added, grinning despite the laser fire. "Never underestimate the power of charm." They reached the convoy and freed the prisoners, but the escape was a race against time. The fortress's automated turrets were relentless, and the corridors were collapsing under their own weight. Elias slid down a rail like an overenthusiastic action hero, only to end up entangled in a cluster of emergency hoses. Seraphine rolled her eyes, flicked her ears, and yanked him free with one precise movement. "You truly are catastrophic," she muttered, though the corners of her lips betrayed a smile. Once outside, navigating back to the freighter, Elias piloted with a combination of instinct, panic, and accidental brilliance. He nearly collided with a black hole, which he insisted later was a scenic detour, before Seraphine took over the controls with a flick of her long ears, stabilizing their trajectory. Despite all the danger, he found himself laughing, shouting ridiculous quips at the pursuing warlord's ships. "Hey, over here, yes, I'm talking to you with the laser cannon. Ever consider stand-up comedy in space? No, you'll regret it." They returned the convoy safely to a neutral sector, but the victory was bittersweet. During the final skirmish, Seraphine had sustained a critical injury. Her movements slowed, and her ears twitched faintly with pain as Elias helped her to the medbay. I could have," he began, panic rising in his chest. "You did enough," she interrupted, voice weak but calm. "More than enough. And besides," she added, one corner of her mouth lifting slightly, "you did survive, didn't you?" Elias swallowed hard. Humor felt inadequate, but he tried anyway. "Barely, but that's how I like it, on the edge, preferably screaming." In the quiet that followed, drifting in the soft blue glow of the medical lights, Elias realized how much he had changed. He had begun this journey as a clumsy, overly sarcastic pilot, terrified of space and responsibility alike. Now he understood the weight of his actions, the fragility of life, and the strength it took to protect those he cared for. Seraphine's presence had taught him courage, focus, and the strange, unquantifiable art of surviving with someone else's life intertwined with his own. She reached up, fingers brushing his hand, and whispered, "Promise me you'll keep laughing, no matter what comes next." Elias nodded, a lump forming in his throat. "I promise, and I'll try to keep flailing heroically in your honor." She let out a small laugh that sounded like wind through alien chimes, and Elias felt something inside him lift. He realized with startling clarity that love, like space itself, was vast, unpredictable, and occasionally lethal, but infinitely worth the risk. The days that followed were quieter. They returned to familiar trade routes, delivering supplies, and occasionally getting into minor scrapes that ended with sarcastic remarks and laughter. Elias' humor had evolved. No longer purely a shield for fear, it had become a bridge between him and Seraphine, a way to share both joy and grief in the unforgiving expanse of space. Eventually, the moment came when Seraphine had to return to her people. Politics, honor, and duty demanded her presence on a distant, war-torn system. Elias walked with her to the shuttle, floating beside her as her long ears caught the starlight. They exchanged a final glance, an understanding deeper than words. "I'll see you again," he said, though even he wasn't sure if it was a vow or a wish. Her lips